Dear respected Thai, dear beloved community, today is July 21st in the year 2021. We are on the third day of our summer retreat at Deer Park Monastery. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, sort of? Okay. To start today's Dharma talk, I would like to ask some questions. And these questions are simple yes and no answer questions. One of the things that I realize is oftentimes we always say, oh, because of this, and you have to give an explanation, and we sort of lose the simplicity of yes and no. So I'd like to invite all of you to close your eyes. And there's no particular object to these questions. So whoever or whatever comes up in your own heart and your own mind, you can use that as your object to answer. And it's going to go by very quick, so there's no space to think. No space to think. So as you hear the question, you can take an in-breath, and then on the out-breath, you can answer quietly to yourself, yes or no. Are you in love? Are you still in love? Do you want to reconnect with the person who used to be the one you love? Do you think that he or she or them is happier than you are now? Do you have time for each other, or are you both busy? Have you been able to preserve your freshness and your beauty for yourself and the other person? Are you capable to offer him, her, or them freshness and beauty every day? Do you know how to handle the suffering within yourself? Are you able to handle the suffering in the other person? Do you understand your own suffering and their roots? Are you able to understand the suffering in the other person? Do you have the capacity to help the other person suffer less? Have you learned the way to calm down your painful feelings and emotions? Do you have the time to listen to yourself, your suffering, your difficulties, and your deepest desires? Do you have the time to listen to him, to her, or to them, to help them suffer less? Do you know the way of restoring communication and bringing about reconciliation? Are you capable of creating the feeling of joy and happiness for yourself? Are you capable of helping the other person to create the feeling of joy and happiness? Do you really think you have a clear spiritual path? Do you have the feeling of peace and contentment within yourself? Do you know how to nourish your love every day? Have you ever met a person who was truly happy? The last question. Are you sure? Dear friends, these questions were offered to the community by Tai in 2013. And he asked the entire assembly to contemplate and to answer. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no right or wrong answer. Just really from within yourself and reflecting upon yourself. And your object of contemplation may even be yourself, not of another person on the outside. So the first time when I heard these questions, like, are you in love? And I said, of course. I love myself more than anything or anyone. And then as he continued on in these questions, like, do you know how to nourish that love? Do you know how to understand that love? To understand yourself? Like, oh, I don't know about that, but I love myself. That's all I know. The only thing I need to do is to know that I love myself, and that's a start. And so whether you answered yes or no to these questions, it's okay. Because as long as we know whether or not we have the capacity to love ourselves, the capacity to understand ourselves or the other person, we can always ask for help. And one of the things that I find a lot nowadays is that we have a lot of pride when it comes to love. Or when it comes to ourselves, our ego, right? You want to say that. When somebody is angry, when somebody is upset, or when you're upset, you said, I'm not angry, I'm not upset. What do you mean? I'm fine, you're the problem here. It's always everybody else but you. Everybody else but you. I'm a victim of that also. And yeah, so every time I come across these questions, it just helps me to come back again. And maybe tomorrow, when you're asking yourself these questions, that you might come up with a different answer. So there's no absolute answer. And the reason why I've asked us not to think about it and just give us the first answer, yes or no, Because every single time we think of a reason, or we have to give an explanation, we're setting a stone or a barrier for us to really see or to touch what is there. Because you're always standing up for yourself. And in true love, we try to put all of that down. Putting down our barriers, our defensiveness. Not necessarily just go with the flow, but go with the flow with mindfulness is a different thing. So the last question that was asked, other than "Are you sure?" one of the questions was asked was, "Have you ever met a person who is truly happy?" A couple of years ago, there was this young boy who came to Deer Park, and he loved coming to Deer Park. And we watched him grow. The monks and nuns watched him grow since he was a child and teenager. And he says, "I love coming here. I love coming to Deer Park." Because I asked him, why? What's so great about Deer Park? It's so hot. So hot. It's dusty, and you always have to watch out for snakes and all of that, And he said, "Because I want to be in a place that is happy all the time. Everybody's smiling. In the morning we're happy, at noon we're happy, in the evening we're happy, 24 hours happy, just happy." And I'm like, well, if you're looking for that place, you won't find it here. And I'm sure some of us, even myself, had shed a lot of tears during this retreat. We're not always happy. But Deer Park Monastery is an environment that can help us generate happiness. And so the idea of coming to a certain place, a certain physical place to be happy is all in our heads. And you can just all go home tomorrow. I will get in trouble if you do. And so that sort of put the young gentleman sort of stop and to think, yes, we are happy here because we have the favorable conditions in order to be happy. But that does not invalidate, or does not mean that when you go home, you don't have that capacity to be happy. Happiness takes very little, and just a little bit of mindfulness, then you will be happy. That's the secret to happiness. So in this light, in Plum Village, we have a teaching called dwelling happily in the present moment. And it's very similar to the teachings of arrived at home. I have arrived, I am home. And we basically have the same content of teachings put in many different articulate ways of expressing. So dwelling happily in the present moment is the same as I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now. And, or breathing in, breathing out. Everything just revolves around being happy in this present moment, right here and right now. And in the teachings of Plum Village, there are 4 key elements to happiness. And in the past few days, we have already learned of the first 2, or maybe 3. We haven't called them out by name. And the first element of happiness is peace. The feeling of peace within ourselves, in our own body. And in the first Dharma talk, Sister Dia shared about learning to embrace our breathing, to being present with our breathing, following our breathing, and the importance of our breathing, and to be calm. And when our breathing with mindfulness is there's a harmony in our physical body. There's a sense of stillness, a sense of calm and groundedness. And as we continue to practice mindful breathing, in the beginning, trust me, I spent the first 10 years, maybe more, of my novice life, of my monastic life, mastering the art of sitting meditation. And it takes a lot of skill. I promise you this, is that I did sitting meditation. Now I can do sitting meditation and fall asleep without moving my body. And it takes a lot of skill to do that, because every time I start counting my breath, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 10, and then all the way back again, I fall asleep. It's the fastest way into sleep mode. And so I've mastered that sitting still, so I may look like I'm in deep samadhi, in deep concentration, but I'm actually just in a deep sleep. And I have no clue what's happening until the bell rings. And it's okay. It's okay if you fall asleep. But then once you water that awareness, once you bring in the element of mindfulness with your breathing, you'll find that naturally, very naturally, without even controlling, that your breath becomes slower and deeper without you having to force it. And I know sometimes as a new practitioner, I've had my resistance with the guided meditation, because sometimes I felt I needed to follow along the exercise. But they're just there, just sort of like, just to help you to recognize, oh, is your breath deeper? Is your breath slower? Is your body relaxed? Not necessarily having to struggle, I gotta relax my body, gotta sit upright and relax and feel my muscles and the tension leaving. That's even more mental stress than it is on the physical stress itself. And so, mindfulness in breathing and calming our body and just slowing down a little bit that's it. That's all there is to this elaborate guided meditation that we do, or elaborate deep relaxation. It's just helping our body to slow down, so we can tap into our bodies. There's a story of the Buddha's time, and it's not so popular. Every single time when we meet scholars or Buddhist practitioners, they like to be very philosophical. And they learn this sutra and they learn that sutra, and they like to learn about the mind. I want to understand the mind. I want to understand, get into the real deep stuff of Buddhism. So you got to open all of those textbooks. But there's this one verse in the Dharmapada, and it's verse number 203. And it's very different. It's a different dynamic from the other verses, the other 200 verses before and the other 200 verses after. And in this particular verse, the Buddha emphasizes a lot on taking care of the body in just 4 lines. The story as told that corresponds to this verse is that there was one time the Buddha realized there's this young man in the neighboring village, that he was just ripe to receive, to attain the first fruit of awakening, which is the stream enterer, with the Buddhist terminology. And so the Buddha went on his alms round to that village. It was about 15 kilometers. Did walking meditation 15 kilometers to go for alms. And he went for his alms, and then he came back to the monastery, and he had his lunch with the monks. And traditionally, usually, this young man, he would always go to listen to the Dharma talk of the Buddha after his meal. But it just so happens that morning, he lost his cow. He lost his cow. And during that time, the cow was very precious. I mean, now it's still very precious in India. And so he spent the whole morning looking for his cow. And then finally, he found the cow, he put him in the stable, and then he made his way to the monastery to listen to the Buddha's Dharma talk. And the Buddha was sitting there, and all the monks were sitting there, and all the lay friends were sitting in the hall. I don't think it's like this. I can't really imagine or envision the Buddha's meditation hall. Maybe out in the fields or out in the forest. And as this young man comes in, the Buddha didn't start the Dharma talk because he was worried. He was worried that he would be late. He didn't want to disturb, but he didn't want to, we were a little bit embarrassed for coming in late. And so the Buddha just sat there and he asked the lay friends to serve this young man some food. And the Buddha continued to sit and enjoy sitting meditation while this young man had his lunch, while he had his glass of water. And then he washed his hand and prepared himself to sit in the hall. So the whole assembly of I don't know how many hundreds of people was just waiting on this one person. I would feel, oh my goodness, eat, hurry, drink in a rush. But he did this all in his own practice of mindful eating and mindful drinking. And when he was finished, the Buddha gave his Dharma talk, and the young man attained the fruit of stream enterer. And so there was a little bit of gossip in the monks' community. Like, did you hear? Did the Buddha, he waited for that guy, for a layman to finish his lunch? And the Buddha just happened to hear the gossip, and he said, yes, I did that. So what of it? Well, not in that tone of voice. That would be my voice. So what of it? And the Buddha said, the most important thing, in order to receive the Dharma, your body needs to be well and healthy. So if he was tired and he was thirsty and he came into the hall and he missed his opportunity because he was falling asleep and he was just too tired and exhausted, then he would have missed his opportunity to listen and to receive the Dharma. And so taking care of our body is a very important aspect of our practice in order to practice. So it's not just, breathing and calming my body and going to sleep, and that's just about it. That's just the first step. The first step of finding that peace inside of ourselves, finding that peace in our physical body, caring for our body is also a practice, but it's also a practice, it's the vessel in which will carry us forth in our practice, in our spiritual practice. And the second element, so I wanted to share that story with all of you. And the second element is clarity. The second element of happiness is clarity. And clarity comes when your body is calm, your mind is relaxed. You have a sense of stillness and groundedness. You're able to see things more clearly. Not necessarily understanding it yet. Just seeing things as they are without judging or reacting, without responding to it, is the second step, the second element of happiness. Because one of the greatest obstacles, and I think Brother Fablu mentioned this in his Dharma talk, one of the greatest obstacles to our happiness is sometimes we have wrong perceptions. And when we look at things and we start to perceive things, there's this cable here that runs for the video. From afar, this is the 10th time I've seen this, but when we first got it, I thought it was a snake. I was like, what is a snake doing in the meditation hall? And seriously, if you just without in the dark, without your flashlight, and you have this cable just lying in the middle of the hall, it's probable, because you already have this set perception, it's hot outside, the snakes wants to come in, and it's cooler in here, and whatnot, and then you can think of then you have this whole worst case scenario in your head. And so having that little sense of clarity of stopping down and just being able to see things as they are, not necessarily having to understand it yet, just that clarity of seeing things as they are without that murmur of thoughts and your perceptions and your fear and your anxiety of the object of what you are looking at. That moment of clarity. The song that I sang earlier, for all of us, there's the line that says, I am water reflecting what is real and what is true. And the example that is given to us in that song is that sometimes when our mind is clouded, when our emotions are stirring, when we have all these feelings and things like, it's like muddied water or even a muddied lake. And if there's a little bit of stillness, a little bit of calm and peace, the rediments starts to settle down. All the muddy stuff starts to settle down, the leaves and things start to settle down. And you start to see more things inside the water itself. You can see in the water, and it's clear, and the moon gets reflected 100% on it. And so then you can see what is real and what is true. Not what you think is in the water, but you can see what is actually in the water. And that water is inside of you in your own mind. So having peace as the first element to calm ourselves down, and clarity as the second element. The third element of happiness that I would like to share with all of you is compassion. It's a big word, compassion, and it's used everywhere now. It's a fad. It's another hashtag, I think. Hashtag compassion. Sorry. But compassion is just more than a hashtag. It's more than just words that you say to make someone feel sympathy. And it's not. And sometimes I find compassion being used as a criticism. Come on, have compassion. And you criticize, but it's not just something that you can, because it's such a profound meaning to it, you just can't just say it out to make yourself sound sophisticated. I hope I'm not doing that. But one of the things that I find is oftentimes compassion is mistaken as pity, to feel sympathetic pity for another person. And I read once in one of the Webster's dictionaries, one of them, there's so many versions of it, that compassion is a sympathetic feeling of pity for another's misfortune with the desire and the willingness to do something about it. So it's not just, I feel for you, man. It's just that, okay, so how can we get through this? How can we come to a place where you come out of that suffering? Can you help another person get out of suffering? Are you capable of that? In other words, are you capable of compassion? The questions that I've asked earlier. And it's hard. It's very hard to practice compassion. So easy to put it on a hashtag, but so hard to practice compassion. And there's so many different levels of it, and there's no particular form of compassion. Somebody thinks just a loving gesture or a hug or baking a vegan pie and sending out, that's compassion. Yes, that's a sign of an expression of love. But in the Buddhist teaching, compassion also goes alongside with the teachings of understanding. With understanding. And that's the grind of compassion. The grind work of compassion is the understanding. And understanding what? What are we going to understand in order to have compassion? And the Buddha has taught us, the first teachings of the Buddha is the Four Noble Truths. There's suffering, the path leading to suffering, traditionally known as the cessation of suffering, modernly known as happiness, and the path leading to the end of suffering, which is also the path leading to happiness. Because that's what it is. When you're no longer suffering, you're either happy or neutral. And so one of the things that I find in each and every one of us, I always like to start off with compassion for myself. As you see, I brought my toys up to play today. I have my dolls here, my nesting dolls here. And you can say, this is me as an adult, as I am now. And I have all these beautiful qualities, and I also have negative qualities and qualities that still need some transformation and healing. And it's okay, I'm here at Deer Park. But also inside of me, there's also different versions of me. The 30-year-old version, the 25-year-old version, the 20-year-old version, the 15-year-old version. And one of the exercises that we do quite often at Deer Park Monastery and all of our Plum Village practice centers is the 5-year-old child. Sometimes as an adult, we have these bursts of emotions, sometimes very strong, and we don't necessarily know where they come from. And then we just simply blame things around us. And then we blame ourselves for not knowing better, for not knowing all of this. And in this 5-year-old child meditation, what happens a lot is we are invited to hold the hand of the 5-year-old us. Have you ever taken the opportunity to look back and just at the child you and say, hello, my dear. Are you okay? Are you happy? This little 5-year-old child, me. And I have to honestly say, I don't remember ever really suffering so much. Because, I do remember crying, but I don't know why. We don't remember stories. We remember feelings more. The feeling of being afraid and left at home, waking up, and your parents are not there. Or I remember when I was younger, I was asleep, taking a nap. I don't remember. My mother told me this. And because I was taking a nap, she didn't want to wake me up to go pick up my sisters from school, which is just down the block. And so I guess while she was picking up my elder sisters from school, I woke up and I started crying and nobody was there, and I picked up the phone and called 911. Obviously, I had the feeling of, where are my mom and dad? And then the police came, Luckily, my mom was just down the street, and the neighbor's like, "Oh yeah, she's just walked out." But that feeling of abandonment as a child, I don't remember that story. I was like, I did, but it happened. But that feeling of, well, FOMO, the feeling of missing out on something. Where did everybody go? It's there, and it's not just a modern term like fear of missing out, and then you're just at home Netflixing while your friends are at the club or something like that. But that feeling is not just this moment now. It's not just when everybody's getting ready to travel post-pandemic and you're still trying to pull things back together. It's not that. It's something that's happened many times before, and it has been unidentified in yourself as a 5-year-old child, 5-year-old me, maybe a 10-year-old child not being invited to your friends or your classmates' birthday party. All of that sort of builds up, and it manifests in different forms. As an adult, you. And sometimes you're like, you're ridiculous. Why are you getting all worked up over something so small? Who cares if she didn't invite you to the party? You don't even like to party. You don't like to socialize, but you still want to go or want to feel that you're invited. But that's not because of the situation. Now it's something deeper and deeper inside. So understanding our own suffering can come back, not just what's happening right here in this present moment, but maybe many different years in the past of your own childhood. And so the 5-year-old guided meditation exercise is for us as an adult to come back, to take the hand of that 5-year-old child and tell her, tell him, tell them, and tell they, I am here for you. In the beginning, the child who has been hurt may feel shy because never before that child has been asked by an adult how they are feeling. And so the child may not know how to say. I know that when my niece and nephew, when they were little, every single time they weren't feeling well, they would say, my tummy hurts. It's always my tummy hurts. But it's not really, if you're having difficulty breathing or your tummy really hurts or you need to go to the bathroom, it's just like it just hurts right here. And it's just here. And sometimes we dismiss that. We always dismiss, oh, you're fine. You're just drinking some water, just go to the bathroom, you'll be okay. And we don't have the time to listen to that 5-year-old child, whether it's a physical 5-year-old child, your niece or nephew, or your own children, or even the 5-year-old child within yourself. Because we're so used to dismissing our feelings. And so as we continue to dismiss these feelings, the child will continue to close even more and more deeper inside. And so we want to help that child to grow. The child does not necessarily need to stay a 5-year-old child. We can help that 5-year-old child inside of us to grow and to mature to a 6-year-old child, to a 7-year-old child, and work with her, and work with him at every age, because everybody at a different part of our life, we all have a different kind of suffering. It's never the same. But if we take the opportunity to just to go back, to listen to this little itty-bitty one, then we can help the bigger ones. You understand yourself more as an adult. And so that in itself takes a lot of courage to do. It takes a lot to be able to come back and say, hey, I'm here for you. I'm here for me. I'm going to listen to all of the stuff that I have not been listening to. Because it's necessary as an adult. It's very crucial for our growth. It's a whole part of you that is there, and you just can't take it away. Can't take it away. So, coming back to the third element of happiness is compassion. It's starting with ourselves, starting from the very basic of understanding our suffering, understanding the roots of our suffering. And what feeds that? What feeds that? Things that come in from our eyes, our ears, our nose, what we smell, what we taste, they can water the seeds of happiness, or they can water the seeds of suffering inside of us, or fear or anxiety, or even our thoughts. Yesterday, Brother Ablu spoke about volition and how that is either nurtures us or it doesn't nurture us. Once we recognize that, all the things leading to our suffering, then automatically you know what would lead to non-suffering, to happiness. It's almost the opposite of it. I think Brother Ablu shared yesterday, and there's this line that came up to me, like a moment on the lips, lifetime on the hips. And how many ever gym hours that is to get rid of it off of the hips, right? But sometimes when we enjoy things, and we know we're doing things like a glass of wine or two every day at dinner, and this is not to judge anyone, it's only from your own awareness. I remember when I was younger, I ordained at a very young age, and so I've never had alcohol, was never the legal age of drinking. But there was one time in France, we're known for chocolates and all these sweets in Europe. I was gifted Monastery, which is the chocolate-covered cherry. And it's fermented. And I didn't know that, and I was only 14, so I ate that, and I just what is this? I was expecting like the Hershey's chocolate kind of thing, the American chocolate, but in France it was like a delicacy. And I was like eating it, and I just spit it out gracefully with a napkin, and just sort of so that the person didn't see projectile, But I out, and I felt it just tasted very bitter on my tongue. There was no sweetness to it at that time. And then, the little bit that I had, I just felt a lot of heat coming through my throat and my neck, going down what I swallowed. And I read the wrapper, and it says there's 1% or 1.01% of alcohol in the cherry, and I was like, ugh, how can you guys enjoy this? And that's my experience of the body with alcohol. Not necessarily, in my discomfort. Maybe because I was so young, I was very sensitive to it. And being aware of how it affects my body and how my body responded to it. And so then, naturally, it became all right, giving up alcohol. Not that I was on it, but it was I've had enough. And so this natural awareness of the suffering that it caused my body itself, not even in the relationship where I was totally lost it and started to say things and do things that I would regret, but just that moment itself, how it affected my body, was enough to give me that, okay, I know that if I don't do this, my body would be happier. And so once you have the awareness of what your suffering is and what leads to that suffering, you, by default, you know what happiness is and what would lead to happiness. And it's a matter of our choice. You have the choice to suffer, or you have the choice not to suffer. And sometimes, just for fun, we choose to suffer, right? Because it's just we're happy all the time. It just seems a little bit boring. So having a little bit of flavor into our life, just to mingle and to dance around, is fun. But sometimes it's too much. Sometimes it's overwhelming. And that's where mindfulness comes in, to just sort of slow us down. And the last element of happiness is courage. Courage. It's not the physical strength, but it's the willingness inside of ourselves to start looking at it. To start looking at it. Just to say, hello, my suffering, I know you are there. Have you even tried to say, I know you are there, and I am so happy that you are there? We have this tendency as human beings to eliminate. We want to get rid of suffering so we can always be happy. But in fact, without suffering, without true suffering, you can never know what true happiness is. Without hunger, you would never know the joy of having a plate full of food. There was one time, actually many times, people ask me if I have any regrets becoming a monastic at such a young age. And I looked at them and I said, doesn't this already give you the answer? Almost 24 years of monastic practice. No regrets. You know, like, what do you want me to regret? I don't have anything, first of all, I don't have anything to compare it to, because I have no concept and no idea. But if you are telling me whether I regret spending my youth in meditation and practice and new friends that is 14, 16, versus getting drunk for 4 years in college and stressing out all night, trying to get the essay in, and then debt after debt after debt. I don't have a bank account, but I'm happy. So do we have those regrets? Sometimes we do things and we regret them. I mean, I'm sure most of the adults now, looking back, it's like, yeah, I did some pretty gnarly things back then. But it's those things that are the fuel for our happiness today. They bring us a different kind of awareness on certain things. A different kind of awareness. Not just the happy awareness, but the awareness of suffering, and that is also very important. Tai has a line that says, no mud, no lotus. And it's true. You can't plant a flower on marble and expect it to grow beautiful as a flower. You can't have a lotus flower on jewels and expect it to be a lotus flower. It is the key element for it to grow, is also a source of nourishment, suffering is also a source of nourishment for happiness. But it depends, if you know how to suffer, if you know how to suffer well, you will be happy. Is knowing how to suffer is the key. It's not eliminating suffering to attain happiness. So those are the 4 conditions of happiness, namely peace, clarity, compassion, and courage. This theme of the retreat is called Be a Refuge. Dharma reign to sustain. What is it? Dharma reign to sustain our relation, our true home, our true home. And I asked myself, what does it mean to be a refuge? To be a refuge. It's a lot. I have been at home caring for my parents for the past almost 10 months. And you can say that I was a refuge for them because they were not well. They're elderly, and so taking care of them, cooking and cleaning and all of that sort. And believe me, there were some moments where I absolutely snapped. I lost it. And I just questioned myself, like, how can I be a place of refuge when I'm still very vulnerable myself? And one of the things I realized, as much as I don't want to admit it, being at home with my parents brought up a lot of the things that I did not like within myself. All those habit energies, because being at deer park is so easy to avoid, evade, because you're such in an environment of people who are loving and kind. So it doesn't really water those trigger seeds, like they don't really trigger you. When you're at home and everything annoys you, everything, and you're smiling and everything, like, I'm trying to be nice here. And no matter what you do, I'm a practitioner. Yeah, my God. That's double shame. Shame on you, Sister Nghiêm. You should know better. And that's what happens, Like, you're an adult, you should know better. You shouldn't act like this. But for me, it was like that I should know better. I got angry and I got very upset. And most of the time, I wanted to blame my parents for it, but I realized, eventually, I admitted that it was because those are the things that I did not like to see in myself. And they were the perfect mirror for me to reflect upon myself. And I just wanted to turn an eye away. But it's always there. And so it's annoying. So I was annoyed with myself. And I just projected it on my parents. But I didn't do anything. And that's a good thing. I didn't say anything. I just sort of went to my room and just said, okay, I'm not having dinner. Very teenager of me. It's like, I'm not hungry. I don't want to do anything with you anymore. I'm fine. Just leave me alone. And eventually I came back out again and did my thing. But it's not easy to be a refuge. To be a refuge. There's a story that Tai had written, and it's an imagination, but it could be true also. If you know the history as recorded of the Buddha, is that right before he reached enlightenment, the moment of his 48th day of deep samadhi, and just a couple more minutes he would reach enlightenment. This is the story that they tell us. All of a sudden, Mara comes from the earth. And he's tried to seduce the Buddha with all these dancing girls and all this riches and money and sexuality and fame and power and all this kind of stuff. And the Buddha is just sitting there. I think it's in one of the movies that Keanu Reeves played too. And he's just sitting there. And all of a sudden, it's a reflection of him. And then Mara says, who do you think you are to become the Buddha? Who do you think is going to witness? Who's going to prove that you're the Buddha? And at that time, the Buddha just touched his hand on the earth and said, the earth is my witness. And then coming back to the story that Thai had written, a couple of years later, after enlightenment, and the Buddha is doing his merry old thing, leading the Sangha and teaching, and one day Mara finds his way to the Buddha. And at that time, Ananda was his attendant, and so Mara comes up, and Ananda was sitting on Vulture Peak, and he sees Mara walking up Vulture Peak. And then Ananda goes, oh my, what is he doing here? He's not going to go see the Buddha, not going to destroy the Buddha again. You know? And so Ananda comes out to the front and tries to stop Mara from coming in. And so Mara goes like, is the Buddha at home? And Ananda goes, dear sir, the Buddha is resting right now. He cannot see you. And then Mara insisted that, okay, I will wait until the Buddha has finished his rest, and I would like to see the Buddha. I need to talk to the Buddha. And Ananda could not say, the Buddha does not want to see you. He can't say that, because then that would mean that the Buddha dislikes Mara. But it's Ananda that dislikes Mara. And so Mara just stayed there, and eventually the Buddha heard some conversation in the front, and he asked Ananda, who is that? And begrudgingly, Ananda says, dear Buddha, Mara is here to see you. And deep in Ananda's heart, he was hopeful that the Buddha would say, no, I don't want to see him. But opposite of that, the Buddha said, really? My old friend, have him come in. Ananda, prepare the tea. And Ananda begrudgingly welcomed Mara into the Buddha's hut, prepared tea, served the tea to Mara, and sat behind the Buddha as his attendant. And the conversation between Mara and the Buddha goes as follows. Mara is complaining to the Buddha that all of his followers are so into meditation now. They all want to transform their suffering. They all want to live a better life. So my students are not creating suffering for others, but they're trying to find a way out of it. It's so hard being Mara. And then the Buddha says, you think it's easy being me? All of my students, I teach them, non-attachment. I teach them loving kindness and compassion and letting go. And they all come to me. They burn all this incense in my face. And then they pray for what? They pray for money. They pray for wife and children. It's not easy. That they forgot about meditation. And then the Buddha asked Mara, do you want to switch places? And you just imagine the Venerable Ananda back then. God, oh, I hope. I do not want to attend to Mara. In the end, the Buddha says, we just all need to be our role. Do our role. I'll do my role as a Buddha, and you continue to do your role as a Mara. You do you, boo. That's what the Buddha said. You do you, boo, and I'll do me, okay? There's no need to switch, and it's okay. And it's okay. But the one thing that I would like to point out is, do you have the capacity to invite Mara into your home, onto your island or into your hut, and welcome Mara, the king, as defined as the king of doubt, the king of fear, the king of anxiety, the king of hatred. That's what Mara is. Do you have the capacity to invite him in and have tea with him? Oh, Mara, my BFF, how are you? It is our perception that Mara is the enemy, but it's not. And the Buddha opened his arms and welcomed him in. And do we have that capacity to open up the Mara, the doubt inside of us, and to embrace that doubt, to embrace that, and say, how are you, my dear? Long time no see. No see. For me, taking refuge is also being able to embrace the Mara inside of me, to embrace the seeds of doubt, of fear. Because I don't want to be a refuge only for good qualities. I also want to be a refuge for the negative qualities inside of me. Because they need it too. Who would have ever thought Mara complaining to the Buddha? People think that they're sworn enemies, but in reality, they are not. They are just one person. So welcome that, to be a place of refuge, to be a place of refuge for your. So accepting, to accept the song that we have in our songbook, The Island Within, and it says there are beautiful trees, fresh clouds. Are you sure you deserted that island to go to the mainland? Where everybody is in that whole social area, Have you deserted your island? And do you really want to go back? To recognize things that are overgrown in that. And to take your time to pull out the weeds, and even to plant some new. And I like to consider the home not as an island, but an island, but I love fashion, if you haven't noticed yet. It's brown, look like a walking chocolate bar. But you are your own interior designer. You have a choice of what you want to put in your living room. What kind of sofa put in your living room? What kind of sofa? What kind of lounge chair, picture? And that's inside all the good qualities. And sometimes you're at leisure and you say, let me call up my BFF Mara and just have him come up and have her come up and just sit and have tea with me, and not necessarily have to do anything. Because sometimes we think when we have suffering, we have to do something to fix it because it's a problem. It's our view and our perception of our suffering that it's a problem and we have to fix it. That puts us on the wrong track. And that's where we start to become aggressive, and we start to fight against it, and we start to reason and and explain things and to deny other things. No, it's just we invite them up. We're just going to have some tea. In this case, young kids, we'll have some boba, and we're just going to chill, and enjoy. Can you just simply enjoy being with your suffering without thinking that it is a problem? I actually did everything. I was a bit worried coming up here. There's another practice that I would like to share with you all, is the practice of touching the earth. Yeah, I the gesture and said, "Who are you? Who's going to believe you?" And the Buddha just placed his hand on the earth. Mine doesn't really reach without me bending forward, but he placed his hand on the earth and he said, "The earth would be my witness, would bear witness to this." And all of a sudden the earth shook. And the came out from the sky. Everything was, I don't know how they glorified this, but I guess there was an earthquake right at the moment the Buddha touched the earth. But touching the earth is one of the important gestures in Buddhism. And it can be easily seen or mistaken as a gesture of devotion, or a religious act of to the earth. Things, I don't want to call myself an atheist, or just to blindly follow anyone, and that's not our purpose. But to really feel that connection in the practice, that's why I practice it. I was so-called labeled a Buddhist, went to the temples when I was younger, but it didn't really mean anything. It was just affiliation with. And so when I came to the practice, all I knew was just that, those are the monks and we are the lay people, and now I'm a monk or I'm a nun, and the relationship is different. I had no idea what I was getting myself into as a practitioner. But one of the things that really touched me a lot when I first learned of the practice of bowing and touching the earth is bowing is an act of being present. Being present. And one hand, you see the monks and nuns do it all the time, but one hand represents our body, one hand represents our mind. And we bring our body and our mind together first, and over our heart, and we bow. And this can just say, all of you bows to, all of me bows to all of you. That's all that there is to it, just really the act of being truly present and offering that presence. And as a monastic, we are trained to read a gatha that says, "A lotus to you, a Buddha to be." Now that can be a little bit way out there. You're not the Buddha. But I'm not bowing to the Buddha. That means the Buddha to be. It means that you have the capacity to understand and to love. I have the capacity to understand and to love. So I'm honoring that inside of you, that of love, understanding, and compassion in you. But the one way that I felt suffering inside of us, I touching the earth. Because just like our breathing is always there, the earth is always there. She won't slip out from under us. You know, she won't just shoot us up to Mars and just leave us up there. She is there, but it's a matter of whether or not we are there for her, whether or not we allow her to listen to us, and vice versa, to listen to her. The practice of touching of the earth for me, I always do, the practice that I always do when I touch the earth, mind over to my heart, and I open my hands up. Sort of I'm opening my mind and opening my heart, and I'm touching the earth. And once I touch the earth, I place my forehead and my limbs, my arms and my knees on the earth, and I turn my hands over with my forehead down. And this, for me, is almost surrendering. I'm pouring my heart, all of the suffering that I have in my heart, all of the pain that I have in my heart, I'm pouring it down to earth in hopes that Mother Earth can hear me. Now, one of the greatest qualities of Mother Earth, and this is something that we see, but it doesn't really click in us yet, is that whether you pour perfume into the earth, or whether you pour milk or honey or water into the earth, she will absorb it and she will transform it. But at the same time, if you were to pour urine or excrement or even poop, whatever you have that is considered defiled, she would also receive it and transform it. That's how we have the compost. Then eventually transform into flowers and beautiful things. So to entrust yourself to the earth, to entrust your suffering and despair when you feel that there is no one left, your mother is there for you. But even in that same position, you can also listen to Mother Earth and to receive, to surrender and to receive from her. She is also crying. She also has wounds. And because we are children of Mother Earth, we also have the capacity to heal and to transform things that are given to us. And in this light of climate change, that's the suffering to Mother Earth and her cries, but it's also very much a part of us. And we can also help heal and transform her by the way of eating and drinking and walking and sitting and smiling, starting off very little. So the practice of touching the earth is not just a spiritual, devout practice, but it's a deep practice of touching and connecting that relationship that we have, yet we have forgotten. And so I would like to thank all of you for being here with me today and listening to my sharing. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the retreat. can